So was President Biden involved in his son's scheme to defy a House subpoena? Listen to this.
The president was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say. And I think what you saw was from the heart from his son.
It sure sounds like it. And now Republicans are opening an investigation, a new investigation, to get to the bottom of it and decide whether it's an impeachable offense. Joining me now to discuss is Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor. Great to see you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Governor, obstruction of justice is an impeachable offense. Is the president guilty of obstruction?
Well, it certainly appears that he may be, and I'm not trying to try him in the court of television, but I do think that it's very troubling that if he, in fact, discussed with his son that he should go and not follow a congressional subpoena, and in fact should go and do a news conference and all but give the middle finger to all of Congress and saying, I'm not going in the building, I'm just here to basically tell you that I'm not talking to you. That's incredibly troubling. I mean, Joe Biden is a lawyer. He may not have been at the top of his class like he used to say he was. Hunter's a lawyer. They know better. This is insane. And I just can't imagine why they ever would have somehow believed that it was okay to thumb their nose at a congressional subpoena with matters as serious as these.
Right. And it also, of course, begs the question of the two-tiered system of justice because of the two Trump aides who were convicted of not obstruction, but defying subpoenas. Contempt of Congress was the charge. Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, both were convicted of contempt of Congress. What about Hunter? Is he going to get some kind of charge for that?
I'm pretty sure he won't, and he should. But if Merrick Garland doesn't pursue the same thing for Hunter Biden that he did for Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, then we do have a two-tiered justice system. But we know we do. But there's another point about Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, especially the case of Peter Navarro. He was on the staff of the president. He believed, and I think he's right, that the executive privilege that extended to him in working for the president meant that the separation of powers argument was such that he was not really able to go and talk to members of Congress about what conversations he may have had with the president. And that's a very different situation than Hunter Biden, who had no executive privilege. He wasn't under the White House protection, didn't work for the White House or for his father in the executive branch. There needs to be separation of powers. This has nothing to do with Hunter, and Hunter should be forced and compelled to give that testimony.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Of course, there's another aspect to this two-tiered system of justice, actually many aspects to it, but the classified documents case where you had President Biden, and Lord knows how he got the classified documents that were strewn all over the place, from his houses to the Penn Biden Center in Philadelphia, all over the place. But how did he get them out? President Trump, we know how President Trump got classified documents because he was president. And under the Presidential Authority Act, he had the right to take some of those things out. Now, whether he mistreated them when he had them is another issue. But prosecutors are slow walking an obvious case against Joe Biden, but rapidly pursuing the case against Donald Trump.
I don't think it's a slow walk. I think it's a no walk. They're not going to do anything to him. And here's a big question. Why did he have documents from when he was a senator? As a senator, he was not allowed to ever possess those documents. They had to stay in the SCIF, that private room in the Capitol where they could see documents, but they were not allowed to take them. The president could take documents. He had the ability to keep them at his home, the White House. He could declassify them. He's the only person, not a vice president, not a senator. None of them can declassify documents, but only the president can declassify documents and say, these are no longer classified. So the question is, did Donald Trump do that? He says he did. Some of the people in the archives say he didn't. But let's face it, even Sandy Berger, who worked for Bill Clinton, stuffed classified papers down his pants.
Yes.
Down his pants, David, and nothing happened to him. This is insane. And I think Americans are supporting Trump in large measure because they watch this and they say, hey, This is not the same treatment being given to Donald Trump that's being given to Democrats, especially Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the whole bunch of them.
Governor, finally, we have this move to get Trump removed from the Colorado ballot, and the GOP has taken it to court. They're trying to get a quick verdict by the Supreme Court on whether this is constitutional or not. The Secretary of State for Colorado, who supported their Supreme Court's decision, said the following: Donald Trump engaged in insurrection and was disqualified under the Constitution from the Colorado ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court got it right. I urge the U.S. Supreme Court to act quickly, given the upcoming presidential primary election. Well, I hope they act quickly, too. But is a guilty verdict by decree, which is what this essentially is, just say because there's been no charge, no conviction, they're just decreeing that he was guilty of insurrection. Is that due process in America?
David, let me put it gently. That guy's an idiot. He's a complete idiot. If he honestly thinks that as the Secretary of State, or she, if she really believes that as Secretary of State, she can just deem someone guilty of insurrection because she thinks so, he's never even been charged with insurrection. He certainly hadn't been convicted of it. So how does she get to decide that he's an insurrectionist? This is absurd on its face. And I hope the Supreme Court gets it, and I hope it's a 9-0 decision, because the 14th Amendment in no way was ever intended to keep a presidential candidate off the ballot, and responsible constitutional scholars understand that and say it. And one other thing about it, if this were to happen, then they'll rue the day, because in other states, if this is going to be the new way of doing things, then let's take Joe Biden off the ballot in Texas and in Florida and in states where they're run by Republicans.
Well, if you can rule that somebody is guilty by decree, no matter whether you're the president or an ex-president or Joe Schmo, due process is dead in America. It's that simple. That is the essence of due process, where you cannot be ruled guilty by decree. You have to go through the due process. Governor, we got to leave it at that. Great to see you. Have a very happy New Year to you and all your family.